Good morning, everybody. It really is a privilege for me to speak in the World Congress and share some thoughts with you about the MBA experience on PAO capacity building. And I'm not trying to give you a practical experience, actually. It would be more or less similar to the presentation of Vernon. Also, MBA is in capacity building since 2007. With a little bit smaller list of countries, by the way. But my intention is to give you a more instrumental approach of PAO capacity building. And what I like to do is to try to converge the presentations you have been hearing so far. So the IFAC approach, the donor approach, and the practical experience of a PAO that is really active in PAO development. So it's an instrumental story. I have 4 slides for you. And actually, if you have seen the first slide, you've seen them all because they look alike. Which is the next one, by the way. Yeah, this one. And it really looks instrumental. It is, like you have heard before in this Congress, about inputs, outputs. I've seen those kind of instrumental developments, how to organize things quite often here in the Congress, but here you have another one. But this is the IFAC approach also in which MBA is working in PAO capacity building. And what you see is IFAC has 130 member PAOs, and those 130 PAOs, they represent 2.5 million accountants in the world. And if those 2.5 million accountants in the world do a proper job, well, the impact in their societies, so the global society actually, on reliable financial information is huge. And actually that is why we designed it like this. So far 130 countries have a PAO as a member of IFAC. Well, it should be 200. We are working on that because then we really have the global approach. But you see that the IFAC approach sees that their intention to involve in capacity building is limited. There is a quite high responsibility for the PAOs themselves. So IFAC Inputs actually is well committed to submit tools and guidance for the PAOs to develop themselves. And actually, when an important PAO in a country is really acting properly with regard to positioning, with regard to society relevance, member added value, enforcing international standards, then that will have some influence on the behavior of their members. And that is very important. The behavior of the members should be in line with international standards, high ethical principles, and if they do that in their society, that will have an impact on society. So organizations will submit financial reporting that is reliable, so that has an influence on proper use of public funds, effectiveness of financial markets, well, economic growth, and in the end, perhaps, we hope, reduction of poverty, and that is in the mission of IFAC. But you see that the different levels can be organized in a way of inputs, outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And the involvement of IFAC actually is on the level of inputs and outputs. Then the responsibility is for the PAOs. Influencing behavior should be on national level with the tools, guidance, and regulations available. They are international. Well, to give you some kind of comparison with something closer to your home, raising children. Apology for the example, because the paternalistic aspect of that was not intended. But what I like to show with this example is the limited level of your involvement. With raising children, children going to school, you try to make the best of them. So they go to school, there's a mandatory program, you help them with their homework, you buy books for them, there is some place to study at home, and you give them good examples. So that are your inputs. If you really look at what is then the output, well, the output is that they are going to school, they read the books, they listen to you, they listen to your recommendations from life experience, they are going to study, they choose their friends. That is output. But the outcome is a little bit more about behavior. So reading the books, going to school is just an output. But the influence on behavior is, are they really learning? Are they really doing their exams properly so they get a diploma? Have they really been involved in good friends? So that is where you already should let it go. Outputs and outcomes, it's more or less about what you really can see they are doing, but the change in the behavior is already something more. Well, and the impact more far away is actually, well, how they grow up, how they will act in society, choose their friends, get a proper job, and be even of value for society. Well, that is really out of your hands. So this comparison more or less is the instrumental approach of PO capacity building. In the Netherlands, we do the same. This is a story of how we have organized our PAO. Our PAO is based on regulation, EU regulation, Dutch regulation, and IVEC standards, international standards. That are the inputs, and that is the basis for our MBA strategy. So the output is MBA tools, MBA guidance, MBA regulation, as the basis of the strategy for dealing with our members. We are giving CPD courses, we are supplying them the tools in the Dutch language, we have a help desk, all that kind of thing. That is our output. That is what we can do as a PAO. That should have an influence on the members. We do have 22,000 members in all categories: auditors, preparers of financial information, accountants in business, government accountants, SME accountants. So the total range of categories we have in our membership. And what we try to do with these kind of activities is that we influence their level of services, the way they choose their services, the level of morality, their ethical values. We want to influence the quality of their work. We want to influence the transparency about their work. But that is member behavior. We already, more or less, should let it go. We have our tools, but member behavior is something they should develop themselves. And if they do that in a proper way, services, morality, quality, and transparency, that it has an enormous impact on Dutch society. Then organizations, businesses, and representatives, they do a proper job, again, in supplying financial information that's reliable, and that is the basis for economic growth. So you see, again, inputs, outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And you see also, very much, also there's a timeline in it. Inputs and outputs is short term. You can organize something in a regulation, translating a tool, giving a CPD course. But influencing behavior is even more, takes more years. So that might be medium term. And once the total membership of a PAO is really acting in a proper way, according to standards, all the standards, then that impact on society will take an even more longer time. That is a long-term approach. So, and that is also very important for PO capacity building. Now I go to the PO capacity building activity of our institute. And we more or less look at in the same way. Our involvement in PO capacity building is about inputs and outputs. And then it is a project of 5 years, it's 6 years, then you're going to leave. Like Vernon said, you need an exit strategy. then the responsibility of the local PAO becomes very important. And to create sustainable development, it is necessary in those 5 years project that in the level of inputs and outputs, you create such a partnership and such a situation within the country that the PAO is becoming the center of excellence, is gaining importance in society, performs dialogues with important stakeholders like government, regulator, universities, so that they really can take over quite quickly. And then they are on their own. Of course, you can support them again with tools and guidance and translations and giving CPD courses. But finally, in a period of 5 years' time, they are on their own, and they should be, because that is the phase of the longer term, influencing the behavior of their members. Are they doing a technically well job? Are they using the IFRSs? Are they using the ISAs, the Code of Ethics? Are they using quality control, regulation in their own environment? And do they a proper job, again, with regard to services, morality, quality, and transparency? And that is really the job of the local PAO. Impact in society, again, is a longer term. It's beyond the exit strategy, actually. And that is influencing public financial management, proper use of public funds, economic growth, effective financial markets. That is then the responsibility of the members of that PAO. And of course, we can come again, but if you come again as a PAO in capacity building activity, you're still talking again about inputs and outputs. In the local situation, it is about the outcomes and the impacts, and indeed, you have to regard it sometimes a long-term approach. To give you one more example about, we have many more examples of course, but about a specific activity, and I'd like to combine it with the IFAC approach and also what Jennifer said about the donor involvement. As MBA, we are doing in quite some countries some activity on the level of quality control and quality assurance. We are helping a local PAO with designing a system of quality control that should be implemented by their member, the firms, as a basis for quality assurance activities, for inspections. So we're helping them in two ways to create the basis for coaching their members, with helping them to create quality control systems, but also we also prepare them already for doing inspections afterwards to see whether those regulations have been implemented and that all the audit files are documented as they should be. That is something we can do for several years. We join them in firm visits, see where they need coaching, where they might have advice for doing the quality control system differently. Maybe that changes the regulation and the instructions from the local PAO. We are giving a CPD course for how you can improve it. We are doing some quality assurance inspections already, but based on the level of the learning experience, not for naming and shaming yet. So that kind of activity we are doing with the local PAOs. And you see that is on the level of inputs and outputs. Then we are leaving, and then the local PAO has gained experience to continue, both coaching, but also doing inspections. And that is continuously going on, even after our exit strategy is the intention. And then gradually you see that the members are learning, they are changing their behavior, quality control measures have been implemented more improved, and quality inspections perhaps have gained better results, more satisfying results. But that is a long-term approach. And if that is happening, well, then of course it has its impact on the clients of the firms, local firms. They have better financial information, more reliable, well, the story again. And if you see we are doing it together with a donor, then of course you need to set criteria for measurement. A donor involvement is very important, but of course when a donor is putting its money in these kind of projects, well, we must have a clear target. We must have a clear baseline. We must have clear indicators where we can measure whether there is success. And you see that is more or less quite easy on the level of inputs and outputs. We can really establish whether there were CPD courses locally already and how many have been organized during our partnership and how many are still existing in a sustainable way. It's a baseline of 0, it's a target of 10, and an indicator, well, how many are really performed every year. So that's quite easy. If you're looking at the outcome level, donors are very interested in that level as well. It's more long-term. It's certainly more medium-term. What has changed in the behavior of the members? What is the level of quality of audits? Well, that is more difficult to measure, of course. What is the level of morality? Has that increased? Difficult to measure. So there already we have some difficulty to find a specific KPIs, indicators, and targets that are measurable in a donor partnership. And especially the last one, the impacts, trust, confidence, economic growth. That is even more difficult to measure. And especially only the accountancy profession is contributing to the impacts. It's not only solely responsible for economic growth, of course. So we agreed with quite a few donors that actually we are building the evidence base along the way, because that is difficult to measure, and it really takes more time. It might even take 5 to 10 years after your exit. So, well, that is showing you an example of really practical MBA experience, but in the instrumental vision, together with the IFAC approach and a donor environment. And if you have any questions afterwards, then happy to answer them. Thank you for your attention.